Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are in early 2046 and our Buffalo Wings have had a relatively busy offseason, made one very important free agent acquisition, signing Harlan Campeau, one of the top pitchers in baseball over the last decade, albeit one who is coming off of an injury-plagued 2045 season, to a 3-year deal, but there are team options in the second and third season, so it could conceivably be just a 1-year deal. But given that we are all in on this 2046 season and trying to achieve a three-peat, figured that adding another big-time starting pitcher to our rotation made a lot of sense. Probably going to be a relatively short episode here. We don't have a lot going on at this point. Still have a little bit of money available for free agents, but no major holes on the team to fill. You can see we've made a few minor league contract offers recently. But the main focus right now is the international amateur free agent pool. And unfortunately, it's not all that impressive this year. YME943 noted that probably no reason at all to go after any of the pitchers given the money that they're looking for, and I tend to agree with that. I'm not in love with any of the players, but I think I do like the center fielder Jorge Ramos the most. I'm going to try to be relatively aggressive with him. He says he's looking for $3 million. If he ends up going for over 4.75, we're not going to really be able to compete for him. So I'm going to offer him $3.5 million right up front and see if maybe we can get him signed. If not, we'll pivot to another player or two, but not the most impressive year of international amateur free agents, in my opinion. So it's probably not something that I'm going to spend as much time digging into in this episode as I normally would. Obviously, we'll keep you posted on how we're doing, but I summarized some of the top prospects at the end of our last episode. There's not really too much else out there that's particularly intriguing to me. So if something comes up, I'll keep you posted. Otherwise, we're going to continue moving through this off season and towards spring training. And it looks like the aggressive overbid on Ramos paid off. He was one of the players that we liked the most. We gave him that $3.5 million offer, which was more than the $3 million he was looking for. And we have him signed, sealed, and delivered. So $1.25 million left, and we're still in the early stages. So should be able to make some offers for some lower caliber talent and hopefully use up some of that funding. But pretty pleased to get the guy that we like the most in a, again, not necessarily incredible class. And we'll try to spend a little bit of the money that we have left, or hopefully most of the money that we have left, on another player or two. And we've got another outfielder signed here, so they're falling fast and furious. Edgar Acevedo is another guy that we had in our camps, and we had viewed as a plan B option. His number supposedly was only $200,000, but by the time we reached out to him, he was looking for $600,000. We offered him $750 right at the start of our negotiations with him, and he signed for that amount rather quickly. So $500,000 less, but we do have two players that we like. Don't necessarily view Acevedo as a budding superstar, but if he develops fully, he certainly could be a useful left-handed utility outfielder. And we're closing in on the start of spring training. We did end up signing two more international amateur free agents. Not particularly impressive, but it got us to the point where we have now spent every penny that we had available. So from that perspective, at least we put the money into somebody. Shortstop Lupe Villasenor, good personality for our DSL team with the high loyalty, work ethic, and low greed. Don't really see him being a big time player. But again, we're just looking for bodies and spending the money on something. We also did end up bringing in a pitching prospect, Juan Drantes. Think the movement and control are going to be significant issues with him. Don't think the 17-year-old lefty has a big future, but another guy who at the very least has some positive personality traits. So like the first two guys that we picked up, not so sure about whether the young shortstop and reliever have much of a future, but at least we've added a little bit more talent and depth into our international complex, and hopefully at some point down the line, at least one of those players of the four we signed will hopefully be making an impact for us in 5 or 6 years. And a relatively small crew with us in Florida this year, just 47 players on the spring training roster, so only 7 non-40-man roster invitees, and they're kind of the names that you would expect from some of our bigger prospects who aren't on the 40-man roster yet. The main goal is really to keep the team healthy. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, we're going to be going for a three-peat this season, so primary goal is to just get everyone in shape and hopefully not have any real significant injuries or health-related setbacks over the next several weeks as we get ready for the start of the 2046 season. And as we get to our final cuts, we're going to make a bit of a surprise move, I think, at the catcher position. You may remember we picked up Alejandro Medina in the Rule 5 draft, and we like the 23-year-old. So we're actually going to keep him as our backup behind the excellent defensive Juan Ramirez. And we're going to send Steve Banks, who we picked up in that trade with Miami and kind of viewed as our definite backup for this year and a guy who could become our long-term answer at catcher. We're actually going to send him down to the minors. He's got 3 option years left. He made his debut last year where he was the backup for Miami all year. At least in the minors, we'll be able to get him playing every day. And it'll give us a look at Medina as our backup, since we've got to keep him on the roster to keep him in our organization. So probably not going to be the most popular move for Mr. Banks, but that's the decision we've made. We're still kind of working out some of our rosters, but Ramirez will be the starting catcher, or some of our lineups. We've figured out the roster now down to 13 players. Ramirez will be our starting catcher, Medina the backup, Reichert at first, Ramiro Medina at second, Danny Ferguson at third, and Damani Essien at short. The youngster Juan Palomo and the utility man veteran Mike Whitehead will be our extra infielders. And then in the outfield, we've got Tim Boston, the youngster Arturo Casares, who we think will be a strong candidate for Rookie of the Year this year, the veteran center fielder Ishmael Velasco, Jamari Habersham, and Josh Porter in right field. Again, we'll be figuring out the exact lineups, particularly against left-handed batters. During spring, we were trying to get some youngsters a little more playing time who are now in the minors, so you can see that we've got a lot of positions that weren't necessarily regularly manned by someone on the 26-man roster during the spring. But like the looks of this roster, and like the looks of our pitching as well. And as we look at our pitching staff, we've still got 2 cuts to make. We're set with the starting rotation: Lance Campo Barajas, the rookie Danny Black, and Jim Coles. Campo was not great in the spring, but only 17 2/3 innings, a small sample size. Everyone else did fine. A few important bullpen spots locked in. McClintock and Auclair, who we signed to contracts this past offseason, are our closer and stopper as expected. Luis Palencia and Simeon Manelli, who had been our number 5 starter the last few years, are going to be setup men. We do have one tough cut that we're going to make right now. Nate Ruckel, the veteran left-hander who had been our stopper for many years and then has been a good reliever for us the past few years. His velocity is down. His stuff is just not that great at this point. And he's not really any more effective against left-handers than right-handers in terms of his ratings. You can see a pretty significant drop in his velocity even from last summer of about 3 miles an hour. His stuff has dropped 10 points over that period of time. He's got a no-trade clause by virtue of being a 10-5 guy at this point, and we are going to waive and DFA him to open up a roster spot. Wouldn't mind if he ends up landing in AAA and no one picks him up. But he, with this strong pitching staff, it's just not really good enough for the major league team right now. That does only leave us with 2 left-handers on the team, so that means Solano Taselli, longtime farmhand for us, spent each of the last 2 years in Albany, is going to get a chance to be a lefty out of our bullpen along with Kevin Hale, which puts us in a situation where we've got one cut left to make against among Mike Roberts, the reliever, Chris Lott, the former starter, and Lazaro Savonarola, who we picked up in the Rule 5. Chris Lott, who was a 17-game winner for us last year as the number 4 starter, is clearly going to end up with a prominent role in the bullpen. So it's really a matter of whether we want Mike Roberts, who is a 28-year-old, fragile, out of options at this point, has spent parts of 4 seasons in the majors with us now, but never really gotten a big-time opportunity. Whether we want to keep Roberts around as a middle reliever for us, or more likely as a long reliever, or Lazaro Savonarola, the 30-year-old who we picked up in the Rule 5 draft. Savonarola has been a pretty average pitcher over the course of his career in terms of his ERA+, much better than average according to his FIP minus. Like what he brings in the clubhouse, like that he's an Iron Man, and his ratings are pretty solid. So I think we're going to look to see if we can pick up anything for Roberts in trade. As I mentioned, he's out of options. If we have to waive and DFA him, we will, to get down to the 26-man roster. But if there's a reasonable trade offer out there for him, we may accept that. And we do have a trade for Roberts that I think we're going to execute on. We're going to bring in Danny Kashuk, left-hander in the Brewers system. We could, as I mentioned, potentially use another lefty down the line. He's out with a sore shoulder right now, and he also is a guy who still has 2 option years left, so we'll be able to put him in AAA, let him recover from that injury, and then see how he does down there before we won't be forced to make a move because he does have those options. Don't love some of his personality traits, the low leadership, loyalty, and intelligence. But you look at what he's done over his major league career, and he's put up a 129 ERA plus and an 82 FIP minus in parts of 3 seasons. As I mentioned, he's a lefty, and he's pretty tough on left-handed batters. With only 2 lefties on the major league team right now, he could conceivably become a somewhat important pitcher for us down the line. There's certainly a chance that if we just waived and DFA'd Roberts, he would make it to AAA without anybody claiming him. But given that I think Kashuk could fill a hole in our lineup. We're going to try to bring him on board. We are bringing on some salary here, so we'll see how much they're willing to keep of his salary for us. It looks like they just want to get away from Kashuk. Makes this even more attractive to us. Oh, they must really hate this guy. They're going to keep his entire salary for this year? Okay. That makes it even easier for us to stash him in AAA. So we'll go ahead and make that deal. Move on from Roberts. Complete the trade for Kashuk. The fans are happy to have him around. As I mentioned, Kashuk does have options, so we will add him to the 40-man and then send him to AAA Albany. And that will leave us with our 13 pitchers on the 26-man roster. Still working on all of the specific roles outside of McClintock and Auclair, and likely Palencia and Minelli. Toselli and Lott as middle relievers probably makes sense. Lazaro Savonarola, not necessarily the ideal long reliever with only that 35 stamina. And maybe Hale can take on more of a prominent role as a long reliever, and maybe we put him in the specialist role as a secondary role for him, given that he does have the best stamina of anyone on the team. So we'll still be tweaking some of the individual roles, and we're still going to be tweaking some of the lineup spots, but we've made our decisions on the 26-man roster, and in our next episode we're going to get the 2046 season off to a start. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.